Looking at maps is fun. Learning about maps in school is fun. Well, maybe not, but that's up to each of us to decide. But learning to read maps is important because it helps us find places we are looking for. It is better to learn how to read a map before you are lost and need to find your way. How would you like to be the driver of this car trying to find where you are going with a road map? It doesn't look like fun to be the driver, passenger, or one of the kids in the back seat, does it? Now is not the time to learn how to read a map. Maps represent our world. We can create maps of our universe, planets, or Earth. We can create maps of continents, countries, states, counties, cities, neighborhoods, or even our house or bedroom. To be useful, maps should have 5 parts: a title, orientation, scale, legend, and grid. Let's quickly look at each of these parts. Starting with the title, like a newspaper headline, the title of a map should tell the reader what a map is about, what its purpose is. The title should tell us precisely where places and things are, where they are on the map, where they are in the real world. A title should indicate when a map was made, too. Things change. We need to know if the map is still current. Orientation is next. Usually people that make maps place north at the top of the map. West is usually to the left and east is usually to the right. We shouldn't have to guess though. Maps tell us where north is by using an arrow or a compass rose, a diagram like the one shown here. This example only identifies north. We would assume that west is to the left and east is to the right. Always look for a compass rose to be sure you understand the orientation of a map. Always look where north, south, east, and west are. Next is scale. Maps help us see distances because everything is drawn to represent its relationship to everything else on the map. A given distance on a map represents a given distance in the real world. Maps like globes, which show large parts of the earth, have small scales. When the scale is small, globes and maps can include large areas. Maps that show cities, neighborhoods, or parks have large scales. When the scale is large, maps can show greater detail. Think of scale as a ratio. For example, a small scale map like this one representing North and South America may use a scale of 1 inch represents 70,000 miles. This can be expressed as a ratio. 1 inch per 70,000 miles. This is a very small ratio, a very small scale. This small scale lets us see very large areas. Here's an example, a larger scale map of downtown Milwaukee. It uses a much larger scale. Perhaps 1 inch represents 1 mile. This can be expressed as a ratio, 1 inch per mile. A large scale like this lets us see smaller areas and shows greater detail. Next is legend. Maps use symbols, small pictures, to communicate information. Maps use icons, just like many web pages do. When we look at a map, we must be able to see what each symbol means. There must be a key or a legend that shows us what each picture or icon on the map represents. Once we understand the symbols in the legend, it becomes easy to quickly locate things on a map. Last is grid. In order to help us find things easily, many maps have a grid, a coordinate system like the graphs on X and Y axes we learn about in math class. We can identify any point on the map, any place on the map, by where horizontal and vertical lines cross on the map. Globes and other small-scale maps use a grid based on horizontal lines called latitude and vertical lines called longitude. These are measured in degrees, just like we measure angles. Maps can use letters and numbers for the horizontal and vertical lines too. They can use any system that lets us identify the intersections on the grid. Remember, these 5 parts are all important because they make maps easier to use. Like anything else people create, maps may or may not have all the 5 elements that we would like to see, the 5 elements that I have identified. When looking at a map for the first time, try to see if you can find each of these 5 items. If a map doesn't have each, you might want to look for another map that will be more helpful. Maybe these people are lost because the map they are using doesn't have all the information they need. We need to be careful and select maps that show us exactly what we need to know. Here are some examples of different types of maps, starting with very small scale maps and moving to larger scales. This map of the world lets us see everything on Earth. It has to be a very small scale to fit on paper or on a computer screen. Notice that there is very little detail. Here is a map of North America. It still uses a pretty small scale, but not as small as the map of the world. There is more detail on this map, but it still does not have enough detail to help us go from one place to another. This map of the United States of America is still a pretty small scale, but not as small as the first 2 examples we have seen. There are more details. Notice that you can see major rivers, but you cannot see all rivers. Now we are moving to larger scale maps, scales that allow us to see more details. This map has more details. It has a larger scale. See how major highways are shown? This map might have enough details to help you drive from Milwaukee to La Crosse. It would not help you find the zoo in Milwaukee, though. There is not enough detail. Here is the city of Milwaukee. It's an even larger scale map. Do you see how all the major roads and highways are clearly labeled? All of the streets are shown, but the scale does not leave room to label each and every street. This map also does not have enough detail to find the zoo in Milwaukee. This map is drawn at a very large scale so that we can see everything at the Milwaukee County Zoo. We can see the parking lot, all of the buildings, the zoo train, and all of the pathways. Look, there's even a legend that shows us where we can get food for the grizzly bears. If we only had a short time to visit the zoo, a large-scale map like this would let us plan what we want to see and help us find everything quickly. You can have a lot of fun with maps. Maps are useful. If you can find each of the 5 map parts we have talked about, title, orientation, scale, legend, and grid, well then maps are easy to use. Now you will always be able to carefully select maps that contain enough details to be helpful. It sure doesn't look like any fun to be lost and confused about the details of a map, does it?